UHD quality video streaming, internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber. UHD quality video streaming, internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
නව ඩොමෙක්ස් වැල්ලම් සහ විසබීජ අවම කර දින 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. ඩොමෙක්ස්.
Tonight, a friend in need is a friend indeed. The $500 million fuel credit line with India inked. No plans to keep in the dark. Norachole third generator added back into the grid, with another power plant set to be added tomorrow.
We feel that with the resources and the generation capacity that we have, there may not be any power cuts in the near future.
Crisis? What crisis? Business confidence at a 9-month high. Rate increase request isn't the solution. Treasury Secretary critical of revenue authorities over reluctance to embrace tech.
In fact, I am yet to see a single proposal emanating from the revenue authorities, in particular, pertaining to the infusion of technology or new processes.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Wednesday, the 2nd of February, 2022.
පියක් දක්වා ඉස්සොරින් නැති 100ක් සුසිනිඳු කෙස් කලබක් ලබා දේ. Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamma Kekanai. Now, the combined cycle power station at the Kalanithissa power plant has ceased operations owing to lack of diesel. It comes at a time when the Energy Minister has given verbal assurance that the Ceylon Electricity Board will have an uninterrupted fuel and oil supply for a week. Before the combined cycle power station's operations were halted, even the Public Utilities Commission said that the electricity requirements can be managed without power cuts.
Yesterday, the operations of the third generator of the Norachole coal power plant was halted by the Ceylon Electricity Board due to maintenance work. After the work finished last evening, the generator was added to the national grid today.
The coal power plant of Lakvijaya has been successfully connected to the national grid, delivering almost 300 megawatts. And the Sojit's power plant, which has been stopped for maintenance a week ago, will be reconnected to the national grid again tomorrow. So if you look at all this data, I think we are in a formidable position to have enough generation of power to overcome this issue that we had yesterday.
Further, the barge-mounted power plant at the Colombo port that halted operations in the afternoon yesterday as it ran out of furnace oil also resumed operations last evening. In the meantime, it looks as if though the CB will not have fuel issues in generating electricity in the week ahead.
Minister Uday Gammampila agreed verbally that necessary stock of oil, diesel and the heavy fuel will be supplied to CB for generation of power. Minister has agreed to supply enough supplies for the next 1 week. We know that CB has to pay almost 90 billion rupees to Petroleum Corporation for the earlier purchases, and out of this 90 billion, CB has agreed to pay 20 billion within next 2-3 days. That is agreement, and after 1 week CB has to purchase diesel and the other necessary oil from the CPC, paying cash on delivery.
Though assurances were given from the PUCSL that there will be no scheduled power cuts, several areas of the country experienced power outages between 6:30 and 8:30 last evening. This left many questioning the credibility of the PUCSL. The Ceylon Electricity Board called them load shedding, which occurs when power demand in certain areas go beyond supply. The power interruption happens automatically to balance the grid, and this process vastly differs to a scheduled power cut. A scheduled power cut is a planned interruption to power based on the estimated demand and supply. This is why the authorities have been urging the people to cut their own power consumption during peak hours, so an automatic load shedding will not occur.
We experience little power shedding all over the country, except maybe the city area in Colombo, and that is in order to balance the network of the distribution and the transmission of power. I don't think there will be any necessity at the moment, and no request also made yet to the Commission for any such scheduled power cuts. Therefore, we hope that with the impending A-level exams, which our students are getting ready, we should not disrupt their education by not having regular power cuts, and therefore we feel that with the resources and the generation capacity that we have, there may not be any power cuts in the near future.
Now, in the meantime, Sri Lanka and India inked the agreement pertaining to the $500 million credit line for purchases of petroleum products this evening. It was signed by Secretary to the Treasury S.R. Artikula from the Sri Lankan side and Chief General Manager of the Exim Bank, Gaurav Bandari, from the Indian side. The deal was put into effect in the presence of Finance Minister Basil Rajpaksha and Indian High Commissioner Gopal Bagle. Announcing the move, the Indian High Commission in Colombo tweeted, "A friend in need is a friend indeed." Later, releasing a communique, the Indian High Commission said that as Sri Lanka's closest neighbour and long-standing partner, India is committed to assist Sri Lanka in its post-COVID economic recovery. It added that signing of the line of credit agreement is another landmark in the bilateral cooperation. The communique also noted that with the recent support, India's overall development assistance to Sri Lanka stands at close to $4 billion. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today instructed the Ceylon Electricity Board to compile a report recommending sites for possible wind power plants. The head of state gave the instructions during an inspection tour at the Tambapawani wind power plant in Mannar.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa visited the Tambapawani wind power plant in Mannar this morning and inspected the premises. The power plant, which was added to the national grid on the 8th of December in 2020, generates 103.5 megawatts with the aid of rich wind resources existing in Mannar. The plant consists of 30 wind turbine towers, each 90 meters in height, that are perfect for power generation. According to the Ceylon Electricity Board, the cost of generating 1 unit of electricity will be less than 8 rupees. At the moment, the power contribution of the wind power plants to the national grid is 248 megawatts. In order to increase that value further, the government plans in adding a further 50 megawatts to the national grid from the Tambapawani power plant. While inquiring into its progress, the head of state instructed the CB officials to prepare a report that includes possible locations to construct wind power plants. By 2030, the government plans in meeting 70% of the country's power requirement via renewable energy resources. Further, reducing the electricity cost of the consumers is also expected to achieve via clean power.
Moving on with other local news, Finance Minister Basil Rajpaksha today revealed the government's intention to ensure that foreign remittances get the market price for dollars instead of the currently maintained peg rate of the central bank. Without giving much details of this intended program, the minister called on the foreign workers to veer away from informal channels when making remittances.
The newly constructed building of the Kurunegala Pradesha Sabha was inaugurated today under the patronage of Minister of Finance Basil Rajapaksa.
අවුරුදු 70 ගානක් වෙනවා අපිට නිදහස ලැබිලා. හැබැයි ඔයාලට අහලා තියෙනවද ණය ගන්නකොට බැන්නට ණය ගෙවනකොට බැනුම් අහපු මුදල් ඇමතිවරේ. දැන් අපිට බනින්නේ මේ ණය ගෙව්වයි කියලා. මේ අවුරුද්දේ පමණක් අපිට සමස්ත ණය ප්‍රමාණය සහ ඒවයි පොලිය ඇමරිකන් ඩොලර් බිලියන 6.9ක් ණය විතරක්. මම මේ රටේ ජනතාවට අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා වෙනුවෙනුත් ගරු අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමා වෙනුවෙනුත් මම සහතික වෙනවා හැම ඩොලර් එකක්ම අපිට ගෙවන්න තියෙන හැම දෙයක්ම අපි මේ වර්ෂයේ ගෙවනවාමයි. ඒක අපිට ශක්තියක් තියෙනවා. ඒක වගකීමෙන් කියන්නේ. හැබැයි මම ඉල්ලනවා විපක්ෂයෙන් ණය ගෙව්වේ නැත්තම් බඩින්න මේ පරම්පරාවේ ඉඳන් ආයිත් බලයට එන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි වෙන පරම්පරාවක හරි බලයට එනකොට ණය නැති රටක් බාර දෙන්න ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිතුමා අධිෂ්ඨාන කරගෙන තියෙනවායි කියන එක අපි කියන්න ඕන. අපේ විදේශ රැකියා වලට යන එකෙන් අපිට ලැබෙන ප්‍රේෂණ කළු කඩේට යවන්න නැතුව අපිත් එක්ක අපේ රටට එන විදියට නීති අනුකූල මාර්ගයෙන් ඒක එවන්න අපි ඒ සඳහා ඉදිරි කාලයේදී උන්ට වෙළඳ පොලේ තියෙන අගයම ගෙවන්න වැඩපිළිවෙලක් රජය විසින් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරනු ඇති. මේවර පහකන්නේ හොඳම අස්සන්න ලැබිලා තියෙන්නේ මේ කුරුණෑගල දිස්ත්‍රික්කයෙන්. ඒත් අස්සන්න කොච්චර හොඳ වුණත් ජනාධිපතිතුමා අගමැතිතුමාගේ නිර්දේශ පරිදි අපිට කිව්වේ ඒ ගොවින්ටත් වන්දි ගෙවන්න කියලා. අපි කුෂිකර්ම ඇමතිතුමාට කියනවා හැම බින් අඟලක්ම වගාකටපු කුරුණෑගල දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ගොවි ජනතාවට ඒ සඳහා කටයුතු කරන බව අපි සඳහන් කරනවා.
Now then, the World Bank wants to see more youth entering Sri Lanka's private sector since the country's growth stems from private sector initiatives. The remarks were made during an economic forum organised jointly by the World Bank and Next Gen Sri Lanka on Monday. Also speaking at the forum, the former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce urged authorities to look beyond short-term investors.
An economic forum was organized jointly by the World Bank and NextGen SL titled Sri Lanka Growth Strategy 2022 on Monday. A range of topics were discussed during the panel discussion, with one of them being the policy decision Sri Lanka should take moving forward in 2022.
One of the big things I would like government to fast track and enable is the digital journey. This needs a more serious policy level involvement. A lot of bits and pieces of work is happening in different institutions, but the real benefit of digital comes when you bring end-to-end connectivity and give ultimate outcome or a solution to drive value. So that's where I believe as a country we have a lot more to do to bring things together. What is happening at the identity card office, what is happening at the passport office, what is happening at the banking system, what is happening at central bank, EOI, customs, inland revenue. These things do need to get connected, and that will really bring a different framework and flavor to the country. So the last budget spoke about bringing in industrial parks to the country. We know we have about 13 industrial parks in the country, mostly managed by the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka. But I think we need to look at expanding those and encouraging that through a strategic focus with the private sector involvement. If we do that, I think we will really have that investment-driven growth to come in.
Meanwhile, the World Bank's chief economist for the South Asian region, Hans Timmer, and the World Bank country director for Sri Lanka, Faris Hadadzavos, were quizzed on how Sri Lanka should begin to address and manage the multiple threats the country is facing at present.
If you are looking for new sources of growth, they will come from a very small initiative in a private sector, especially in the services sector. That's where the real opportunities are. To understand where the opportunities for Sri Lanka are, it is important to talk to people and to understand what they see at the moment as their bottleneck, and why are not more talented people exploring these new opportunities. That's what you need to increase your exports. It will not come from big investments in existing sectors. It will come from those new sectors.
We need to ask ourselves the question, what is the narrative, what is the storyline for Sri Lanka? We were to ask each other from what you see, what you hear and everything. We have a clear narrative. We can put in half a page what development storyline for Sri Lanka. Whatever we're doing now, 7 years, in terms of innovation, in terms of conducting business, in terms of new products, 7 years down the road is going to be completely redundant. Similarly, and again, forgive me, I'm not giving an accurate number of years, 7 years down the road, whatever's going to happen there, whatever will be produced, we won't even conceive of today. So my bottom line question, do you want to put that in the hands of young, passionate, smart, young ladies and men in Sri Lanka, private sector entrepreneurs, and you want to put it in the hands of people like me and the public sector? Sorry to say that. This is not the time when we were in school. This is a completely different time. My kid is in high school. When he finishes college, he'll probably be in a field that we haven't even conceived of. And that's the world we live in. Sri Lanka is a beautiful island. It's a small island. Your whole history from Serendip until now, you are strategically positioned, not physically, but also intellectually and trade-wise with the rest of the world. So the future lies outside the shores of Sri Lanka. And for that, it's about competitiveness. It's about finding sources of growth. It's about exploiting the opportunities of what you have here through greater global value chains, greater additionality in a number of areas. In the absence of that, we will be bound to the shores of the country to some extent. But the optimism requires an identifying new avenues and creating pathways for people to flourish. Global value chains, identifying areas of high value added, but allowing people to do that who have the ideas and keeping in mind that we have already reached a point where the nature of industry, the nature of innovation has gone way beyond our capacity to model and to do. So we need to create an ecosystem to let others who have more energy move forward with it. So I think that's the key.
In the meantime, former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Rajendran Tyagaraja, weighed in on investment attraction.
There are two types of investments. You have those who will make use of challenging times like today and want to come in short term to profit. And those who will look at things more on a medium term to come in because they like the attributes of the country. And frankly, the type of quality of investments I think Sri Lanka needs to attract is the latter, sustainable in nature. And frankly, for somebody to look at investing from a sustainable point of view, they will certainly look at not just tax-free status or tax benefits. They will look at a whole host of attributes which create an enabling environment for them to do business in a trouble-free manner. It is a question of being consistent in applying those and measuring and reporting.
We will see shortly on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Treasury Secretary S.R. Artigala today criticised revenue authorities over their failure to embrace new technology, especially in this new normal. Addressing the convocation ceremony of the Sri Lanka Institute of Taxation, Artigala also went on to say that the island's tax revenue to GDP is relatively low in comparison to its peers.
Sri Lanka enjoys a long history of taxation of almost 90 years, as the first income tax statute was enacted in 1932. However, the tax revenue to GDP still remains relatively low in comparison with its peers. The low tax revenue is integrally facilitated by the tax evasion and avoidance. In the recent past, we have taken a number of steps to curtail tax evasion and strengthen tax administration, including infusion of digitalization, simplification of the tax system. In addition, the role that can be played by tax professionals in increasing tax compliance is greatly recognized. Tax education is one of the main ways to enhance tax compliance, as it would build up professionals who would boost the willingness of individuals and businesses to voluntarily pay taxes. However, I must say that in spite of continuous education, the tax professionals have been reluctant to embrace technology and associated developments. This is a serious issue, especially in this time of new normal. In fact, I am yet to see a single proposal emanating from the revenue authorities in particular pertaining to the infusion of technology or new processes. One only needs to look at peer countries to understand the impact of technology and perhaps smart technology. It is time that the tax profession as a whole embraces such new advancements. Requesting to increase rates is easy, but that is not the solution.
Now, focusing on the pandemic situation, even though Sri Lanka's daily COVID cases continue to surge over 1,000, health authorities believe that it is too early for it to be termed as another COVID wave.
Sri Lanka's daily caseload continued to stay above 1,000 for a third consecutive day yesterday. This, however, doesn't come as a surprise to health authorities, as the increased social mixing and the spread of the Omicron variant in society meant this was an inevitable outcome. However, even though the country's daily COVID caseload continues to stay over 1,000, health experts believe that it is too early to term it as another COVID-19 wave.
ඕනෑම වෙලාවක වසංගත රෝගී තත්ත්වයකදී අඩු වැඩි වීම වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා අපිට මේ මොහොතේ රැල්ලක් ඇති වෙනවද නැත්ද කියන එක මම හිතන්නේ අපිට කියන්න තරමට ලෝකින් රෝගීන් වැඩි වීමක් නැහැ. නමුත් අපි දන්නවා මේ මොහොත වෙනකොට අපේ අවට ඉන්න දන්නා හුඟ දෙනෙක් අතරට මේ රෝගය වෙනදට වඩා රෝගීන් ඉන්න බව පැහැදිලි. ඒ තත්ත්වය තුල ඉදිරියේදී තවත් රෝගීන් වැඩි වෙන්නට ඉඩ තියෙන නිසා අපි ප්‍රවේශම් වෙනවා නම් මම හිතනවා මේ රැල්ල අපිට වළක්වා ගන්න පුළුවන්. මේ තත්ත්වය තුල අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වන්නේ රටේ සමාජික සහ ආර්ථික ක්‍රියාවලියන් වලට රෝගීන්ගේ නිරෝධායන ක්‍රියාවලියෙන් ඇතිවන්නා වූ බලපෑම අවම කරගනිමින් අපිට ඉදිරියට ගමනක් යාමටයි අවශ්‍ය වන්නේ. ඒකට අවශ්‍ය වෙන විදිහට තමයි මේ මාර්ගෝපදේශ නිකුත් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ වගේම තමයි මම නැවතත් කියනවා මේ தত্ত্বය බරපතල නොවන දෙයක් හැටියට මම කොහෙත්ම කිව්වෙත් නැහැ, කියන්නෙත් නැහැ. නමුත් අපිට සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයට මැදිහත් වෙලා මේක පාලනය කරන්න පුළුවන් තත්ත්වය නෙමෙයි තියෙන්නේ. අපි සියලු දෙනාම එකතු වෙලායි මේක පාලනය කරන්න ඕනේ.
As such, getting the vaccine and adhering to health guidelines are the only ways health experts believe that the country will be able to weather the brewing storm, while ensuring the country's health system doesn't come under stress from a surge in cases. However, despite this message, many are still skeptical about the booster dose. As such, health experts provided facts today highlighting the benefits of the two-dose regime vaccination and the booster.
මේ වන විට මුළු ලංකාවේම වගේ රෝගීන්ගේ වාර්තා වීම 15% වගේ ප්‍රමාණයකින් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම මරණ සංඛ්‍යාව 4%කින් පමණ කොළඹ නගරය තුල වැඩි වෙලා තිබෙනවා. මෙහිදී අපි දකින විශේෂිතම දේ තමයි තුන්වන බූස්ටර් මාත්‍රාව ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා දක්වන්නා වූ මෙරිකම. ජනවාරි 1 වෙනිදා සිට මේ දක්වා මියගිය සියලු දෙනාම එක්කෝ එක මාත්‍රාවක් හෝ ලබාගෙන නැහැ. එක්කෝ එක මාත්‍රාවක් පමණයි අසම්පූර්ණ එන්නත්කරණයක්. එහෙම නැත්නම් මාත්‍රා දෙකම ලබාගෙන නමුත් මාස 6, 7, 8ක් ඉක්ම ගිහිල්ලා තුන්වෙනි මාත්‍රාව ලබා නොගත් අය.
Meanwhile, health experts announced a rather peculiar observation in the vaccination of school children.
පාසල් තුල එන්නත් කරන වැඩසටහනේදී ජාත්‍යන්තර පාසල් වල අවුරුදු 12න් වැඩි දරුවන් සඳහා ලබා දෙනා වූ ෆයිසර් එන්නත් මාත්‍රාව ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා ඉතාම විශාල ඉල්ලුමක් ජාත්‍යන්තර පාසල් වල දරුවන් තුල තිබුණා 90%කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක් සමහර ස්කෝල 92ක් වැනි ඉහළාගයක් ගත්තා. ඒතර ඒ වගේම සමහර රජයේ පාසල් වල මෙම ප්‍රතිශතය 50%ක් පමණ තිබුණේ.
Now then, this is just in. Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa has said that Sri Lanka has informed the IMF in writing to provide experts' advice on current economic situation in the island, and that Sri Lanka expects IMF representatives to visit the country shortly. Now that's a new development. Moving on with other stories, Sri Lankan companies on average are moderately transparent is the observation made in the Transparency International Sri Lanka's latest report, Transparency in Corporate Reporting for the year 2021. The TISL has expanded the number of companies assessed for the year 2021 compared to 2020.
The Transparency International Sri Lanka launched the report Transparency in Corporate Reporting for the year 2021 today. It's the second of its kind following a similar publication for the year 2020. And the TISL has assessed the top 75 companies listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange based on market capitalization.
Research that was done for this report, through this we found that companies in Sri Lanka are considered moderately transparent. What that means is that we've done a research of these companies' corporate reports. We've looked at how they are reporting, how transparent they are in their reporting. We've allocated scores based on this study. 0 is least transparent in corporate reporting and 10 is fully transparent. Now, companies on average in Sri Lanka, they've scored 6.93. Now, that is considered moderately transparent. We picked the 1st of June 2021 and conducted the assessment from around July last year.
The areas that were assessed in the preparation of the Transparency Corporate Reporting Report for 2021 were also explained.
Firstly, it's on reporting on anti-corruption programs. An example for one of the questions that fall under this section would be if a company has a strong policy on how to combat corruption. The second section is transparency in company holdings, or what we also call organizational transparency. What we've looked at is if companies have disclosed how many subsidiaries they have, if they've given a list of their subsidiaries. In our third section, we have disclosure of key financial information, where we're looking at domestic operations. So in Sri Lanka, we're looking at if companies have provided information on their revenue, capital expenditure, income tax, pre-income tax, and also importantly looking at if companies have reported on the community contributions they made, or what we commonly call CSR projects.
Elias meanwhile clarified what a low or high score means and the objective of compiling the report of this nature.
Last time the overall score was 6.73 compared to this time score of 6.93. But just keep in mind that this is because we've added about 26 new companies to this list. A low score or a low rank does not necessarily mean that a company is bad or that they are engaged in any wrongdoing of any sort. It just means that from the 75 we've taken, they just happen to score on the lower end because they've released less information than the others. What we intend to do with this assessment is to make it a conversation starter. It's meant to open doors to speak to the private sector about how they can do better, how they can be better, how they can disclose information in a better way.
Welcome back to First at 9. Now, just as it was in December last year, the business sentiment has improved in January, hitting a 9-month high. According to the latest LMD Nielsen IQ Business Confidence Survey, there had been a 3-point increase in January, taking the index to 122.
Amid cost of living issues and forex concerns, the central bank increased policy rates last month by 50 basis points. In doing so, the central bank expects an increase in interest rates, particularly in deposit rates, which it hopes would encourage savings and discourage excessive consumption, such as imports. The central bank data for January shows that inflation is running away and the forex troubles have no end in sight. But this was the case in December too. And yet, business confidence in the month spiked to a 7-month high, despite fears about the overall economy. And just as it was then, despite the bleak outlook, the outcome of the latest LMD Nielsen Business Confidence Index survey gives a more positive picture. The index is now at a 9-month high. The business confidence index nudged upwards by 3 basis points from the previous month to register 122 in January. The index stands at where it stood a year ago and is 14 points above its 12-month average of 108. However, Nielsen IQ's Director of Consumer Insights, Derana says that while the business confidence index has increased slightly, the sentiment isn't shared by the general public as the consumer confidence index has dropped to an all-time low of 25. She also notes that inflation and shortages of key commodities still persist. In any case, AdaDerana attributes a slight improvement in sentiment to businesses formulating new strategies to salvage and improve on whatever has been lost due to the pandemic in 2021.
Now, the Colombo Stock Exchange ended in negative territory today as the all-share price index closed 338.10 points lower at 12,584.02. The S&P SL 20 meanwhile lost 123.26 points to close at 4,221.16. Now here's Hiruni Pereira with a brief report on today's market performance.
Today also we saw market ending in the red zone, declining to 1-month low ASPI, continuing the negative sentiment for the second consecutive day, losing 338 points, which is about 2.5 months high intraday loss, with turnover recording slightly high level close to 8.9 billion. So today index opened with a slight uptrend, hitting an intraday high of 12,976, gaining 50 points. However, from the beginning of the day itself, index started to decline throughout the day, closing at 12,584 levels as the investors continue the negative sentiment and sell-off continued in retail favorite stocks. So today's decline was mainly led by retail favorite counters which are operating in the transportation, diversified financial sector and insurance sectors. Activities were into the lower scale compared to yesterday as number of trades were recorded at 66,169 level.
The rupee meanwhile continues to be at 202.99 cents against the US dollar. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies during the day. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.